The first time I understood what a king's guardsman actually does. I was standing 20 feet away from one and I didn't see a thing. My name is Iris Calloway. I've been giving walking tours of central London for 11 years. I know the difference between a Coldstream collar and a grenadier one. I know which sentries get photographed the most. I know which tourists tip and which ones argue about the price of a bottle of water. I thought I knew Horse Guards Parade the way you know the route to your own kitchen at night. I was wrong. This is the story of one afternoon in late summer, and what I saw, and what I almost didn't see, and a young man in a saddle named Daniel Holbrook who saw everything before any of us did. It begins, as these things always do, on an ordinary day. The light was the slow gold kind that London gets in August around 4 in the afternoon. The kind of light that makes the stone of the old Admiralty building look softer than it is. I had finished a tour at noon. I had eaten a sandwich on a bench by the lake. I was walking back toward Charing Cross with no plan, except to go home and put my feet up. But I stopped at Horse Guards. I always stop at Horse Guards. There were 2 mounted sentries that afternoon, one on either side of the archway, in the black and red of the Blues and Royals. The one on the left was a man I would later learn was called Lance Corporal Daniel Holbrook, 6 years served. 2 tours in Mali. 28 years old, a face that the helmet's chin strap pressed into shape, narrow at the jaw, with eyes that did not move. His horse was called Sovereign, a bay gelding, 16 hands, with a white blaze and a way of holding his head that suggested he had heard every joke a tourist could make and was no longer interested. Neither of them moved. That was the first thing. That was always the first thing. People came to Horse Guards to see things that did not move. A coach had pulled up on Whitehall maybe 10 minutes earlier. I'd watched the group spill out, 14 of them, mostly couples, a handful of teenagers, 1 or 2 older women in sensible shoes. Their guide was a small woman in a yellow waistcoat holding a folded umbrella above her head like a flag. I learned later her name was Petra Janku. She was Czech. She ran tours out of Prague twice a year and brought groups to London in August because the prices were better than in spring. Petra was already counting heads. Tour guides do that constantly. It's the first thing you learn and the last thing you forget. 14 on the coach, 14 on the pavement. Good. She gathered them in a half circle around the left-hand sentry box. She started her speech in Czech. I don't speak Czech, but I know the rhythm of that speech because I've given it 1,000 times in English. Don't touch the horse. Don't touch the soldier. You can stand close, but not too close. Yes, you can take photos. No, he will not smile. The group laughed in the right places. That was a good group, I remember thinking. A polite group. The kind of group I would have been happy to have. I leaned against the railing on the far side of the parade ground and watched, and Daniel Holbrook watched too. You couldn't tell he was watching. That was the whole point. His eyes appeared fixed forward on a spot in the middle distance, somewhere above the heads of the tourists. The chin strap pressed against his lower lip. A bead of sweat had gathered at his temple and was making its slow way down toward his collar. He did not blink it away, but he was watching. I know that now. I didn't know it then. What he was seeing, while Petra explained the history of the household cavalry in Czech, was this: 14 people in a half circle, all of them in summer clothes, most of them holding phones, 2 of them holding proper cameras with straps. He saw the loud American couple at the back. He saw the grandmother with the sun hat fanning herself with a paper map. He saw the 2 teenagers. Twins, maybe, both on their phones, both wearing the same band t-shirt. He saw a young couple holding hands. He saw a woman in her 50s with a small dog in a carrier bag, which she was not supposed to have at Horse Guards, but which no one was going to say anything about. And he saw a man, middle-aged, beige jacket, even though it was warm. Khaki trousers, the kind you buy at an airport. A small grey day pack hanging off one shoulder. A face that was neither handsome nor ugly. A man you would not remember if you walked past him on a station platform. He was smiling. That was the thing Holbrook noticed first. Not a big smile. A small, polite, attentive smile. The kind of smile a man wears when he wants you to think he is interested in what you're saying. The man was at the back of the group, slightly to one side. He was nodding along to Petra's speech, even though Holbrook would later say he didn't believe the man understood a word of Czech. That was the second thing. The third thing was the boots. The man in the beige jacket was wearing boots. Not trainers, not sandals, not the suede things older tourists wear when they want to look both smart and comfortable. Boots, black, tactical, the kind with reinforced toes and the small loops at the heel for pulling them on quickly. They were laced tight to the top. They looked like they had been bought new that week. The leather was stiff, the soles were clean. There was no scuff at the toe, no dust in the crease where the boot bent at the ankle. Tourists don't wear boots like that. Soldiers do, soldiers who have worn them for months until they fit. These had not been worn for months, these had been worn for days. Daniel Holbrook saw the boots at minute 3. By minute 4, he had a name for the man in his head. He didn't know the man's actual name. He never would, in the way you know a person's name when you've met them properly. But he gave him a label, the way you label a horse you don't trust yet. He called him in his head Boots. Boots was a problem. Holbrook did not yet know what kind of problem that would come. For now, he simply held the information. The way you hold a coin in your pocket when you're trying to remember what it's for. Petra finished her speech. The group broke into smaller clusters. Cameras came up. The first wave of tourists drifted close to the sentry box. The way they always do. The way they always have for as long as there have been sentries to drift close to. And Daniel Holbrook, in his saddle, did not move. But he was no longer just a guard. He was a tripwire, and the wire had just been touched. The American man was first. He was a big man in a polo shirt, sunburned across the back of his neck, and he had the loud confidence of someone who had been to many places and was no longer impressed by any of them. He stopped about 4 feet from Sovereign's nose and said, in a voice that carried across the whole square, "Hey, buddy, you alive in there?" His wife laughed. The American man grinned. He waved his hand back and forth in front of Holbrook's face, not quite close enough to touch. Holbrook did not move. Sovereign did not move. "Tough crowd," the American said, and his wife took a photo of him grinning next to the unmoving horse, and they wandered off to look at the archway. That was the first one. There would be many. Behind them came a teenage girl, one of the twins, who held her phone up at arm's length and pulled what she clearly believed was a very funny face, right next to Holbrook's stirrup. Her sister took the photo. They scrolled through the result, decided it was not funny enough, and moved closer to try again. Holbrook did not move. Sovereign did not move. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, broke loose from his mother's hand and ran up to the horse with something clutched in his fist. His mother shouted in a language I didn't recognize. The boy reached up on his tiptoes. He was holding half a sandwich badly squashed, which appeared to be ham and cheese. He held it out to Sovereign. Sovereign, who had eaten oats in stables that smelled of leather and old straw, who had carried this same man on his back through state visits and royal funerals, who had heard the last post played live in his ear more than once, looked down at the sandwich. His ear flicked. Once. That was all. The boy's mother arrived in a panic and pulled him away, apologizing in 3 languages. Holbrook's face did not change. Sovereign's face did not change. The sandwich was retrieved. The boy was scolded. The little party moved on, and so it went. A woman tried to make Sovereign sneeze by waving a tissue. A young man counted out loud in English to see how long the guard would go without blinking. Another took a photo with his thumb up, then with 2 thumbs up, then with a peace sign, then with what he seemed to think was a salute, but was actually just an awkward wave. Holbrook did not move. Sovereign did not move. The horse, I realized later, was the most patient creature I had ever seen in central London. Possibly the most patient creature in the country. He simply existed, the way an old bridge exists while small annoying things passed over him. And while all of this was happening, the sandwich, the tissue, the counting, the bunny ears, Daniel Holbrook was working. You couldn't see him working. That was the point to everyone in that square. He was a man playing a statue, and not very interactively at that. But Holbrook's eyes, behind the still face, were moving. Not the eyes themselves, the attention behind them. He was tracking a man in a beige jacket as that man moved slowly, politely, almost shyly, around the edge of the tour group. Boots was taking photographs. That, in itself, was not strange. Everyone was taking photographs. The whole point of Horse Guards Parade in August is to take photographs. But Boots was not taking photographs of the horse. He took one of the horse, yes, A single one quickly, the way a man does when he wants a photograph to exist in his camera roll for later as proof that he was there. He took another of the archway, and one of Petra, and one of the building behind. All the photographs a tourist takes, and then he took the others. He took a photograph of the drain pipe that ran down the corner of the old Admiralty building. He took one of the small iron gates set into the wall on the south side, the one that staff use, the one no tourist ever notices. He took one of the rooftop opposite, angled upward, with the camera held casually at his hip as though he weren't really looking. He took one of the sightline down Whitehall toward the gates of Downing Street. He took it without raising his camera to his eye. He simply held it, screen forward, at the level of his chest and let it click and lowered it again. He never looked at the screen. A tourist looks at the screen. A tourist takes a photograph and then immediately checks it the way you check a coin you've just been given to make sure it's real. Boots did not check. Daniel Holbrook saw him not check. That was the fourth thing. By minute 8, Holbrook had what he would later describe in an after-action report I would never read, but which a friend in the Met would one day summarize for me over a pint, as strong indicators. Strong indicators of what? The friend would not say. He didn't have to. Boots was casing the gate. Now, here is the thing that I, Iris Calloway, tour guide of 11 years standing, did not know about the household cavalry. I did not know they had signals. Of course they have signals. Of course they do. You don't put a man on a horse in the middle of a crowd of strangers in one of the most photographed spots in Europe and trust him to handle whatever happens with nothing but a sword and a wireless radio that anyone can see him use. You give him a way to speak without speaking. You teach him to talk through the horse. The horse is the radio. The reins are the keys. I learned this later, in pieces, from people who would not give me their names. The signals are not in any public manual. They look to a watching tourist like the small adjustments any rider makes, a shift of the hand, a shortening of the grip, a touch of the leg against the saddle. They mean nothing if you don't know what to look for. If you know what to look for, they mean everything. The relief station for the Horse Guards mounted sentries sits behind the parade ground, in a small room with a window that looks directly out at the 2 sentry boxes. There is always someone in that room. That afternoon, there was a sergeant called Mary Aitken. Sergeant Aitken had served 14 years. She had 3 children at home and a husband who taught geography at a secondary school in Croydon. She drank her tea with 1 sugar. She had a radio in her hand and a window in front of her, and she was watching Daniel Holbrook the way mothers watch toddlers near water. At minute 9, she saw his right hand move. It was not a large movement. To anyone else in the square, it would have looked like nothing. A small adjustment of the reins. The kind of thing a rider does to settle a horse who has shifted his weight. He drew the right rein in by perhaps an inch, held it for 2 seconds and released it. Sergeant Aitken put her tea down. She picked up the radio. She did not press the transmit button yet. She watched Holbrook's left hand move next. Same gesture mirrored. An inch in, 2 seconds, release. Sergeant Aitken pressed the transmit button. "Bravo 2 from Relief 1, she said. Her voice was perfectly calm. "I have a request from the post." The voice that came back was male. Brisk, also perfectly calm. "Go ahead, Relief 1, initial indicator from the saddle." Repeat, initial indicator from the saddle. Subject, not yet identified. Stand by. Copy. Standing by. In a building 2 streets away. In a room I have never been in and never will be. A man at a desk turned his chair toward a bank of screens. On the parade ground, Daniel Holbrook did not move. Sovereign did not move. The little boy with the sandwich had come back. Sandwich less this time, and was now standing about 10 feet away, simply staring up at the horse with the unblinking, devotional gaze of a child who has decided he is in love. Behind him, Boots took another photograph of the small iron gate. I want to be honest with you about something. I did not see any of this while it was happening. I saw a man on a horse. I saw a crowd of tourists. I saw Petra in her yellow waistcoat counting heads. I saw the little boy with the sandwich. I saw the American man with the sunburn. I did not see the boots. I did not see the man not check his camera screen. I did not see the inch of rain, twice, 2 seconds each. I did not see a few minutes later the policeman, but the policeman saw me. He saw everyone. That was his job. His name, I would learn, was Police Constable Owen Riley. He was attached to the Diplomatic Protection Group. He was 34 years old. He was wearing what looked like a slightly cheap suit, because that is what plainclothes officers in central London wear in summer, and he was carrying a takeaway coffee cup from a chain he never used. The cup was a prop. The coffee was real but lukewarm. He had been carrying it for 20 minutes. PC Riley had been walking the same 40-meter stretch of pavement on the south side of the parade ground for the better part of an hour. He had passed Holbrook's sentry box 4 times. He had stood near the railing twice, pretending to take a phone call. He had bought a bottle of water from the kiosk and put it in his jacket pocket and forgotten about it. He was waiting for nothing in particular, which is what you do in his job most of the time. At minute 11, his earpiece said his name. Mike 1, this is Bravo 2, possible indicator at Horse Guards mounted post south. Drift west, eyes on the parade group. Look for new tactical footwear. Acknowledge. Owen Riley took a sip of cold coffee and began to walk west. He did not hurry. Hurrying is what gets people killed. He walked the way a man walks when he is going nowhere in particular, which is to say slowly, with his weight on his heels and his eyes on his phone screen, which was dark. He drifted into the crowd around Petra's group as though he were considering joining them, then drifted out again. He saw the boots in 3 seconds. He kept walking. He did not break stride. He did not look at Holbrook. He did not look at Sergeant Aitken's window. He turned the corner at the south end of the parade ground, stopped, leaned against the railing, took out his phone, and pressed the side button twice. Bravo 2, this is Mike 1, confirmed. Subject is male. IC1, 50s, beige jacket, grey rucksack, new black tactical, 6-eye lace, dual loop, east side of the group, currently photographing rear access gate. I have control. Request 2nd and 3rd unit, slow approach. Mike 1 from Bravo 2. Copy Tango 1 and Tango 2 converging. Maintain distance. Do not initiate. Copy. Holding. Owen Riley put his phone back in his pocket and turned around and walked, slowly, back toward the parade ground. On a bench across the square, a couple sat with a folded map between them. They had been arguing in a friendly way about which direction Trafalgar Square was. They had been arguing about it for 10 minutes. The map was a prop. They were Tango 1. By the kiosk, a man in a dark t-shirt was checking the price of a postcard he was not going to buy. He had been checking it on and off for 15 minutes. He was Tango 2. None of them looked at Boots. All of them knew exactly where he was. Boots knelt to tie his shoe. This is the moment that, when I think about it now, still makes my chest go tight. He didn't need to tie his shoe. The laces of his new black tactical boots were already drawn tight, the way new laces are, the way they will stay until the leather softens and gives. There was nothing to tie. But he knelt anyway, on one knee, his grey daypack slung off his shoulder and resting on the cobbles beside him. He pretended to fuss with the laces of his right boot. His left hand, the one out of sight from the tour group, opened the zipper of the daypack. Not all the way, just 3 inches more than it needed to be. I want to tell you that I saw what was inside the bag. I didn't. I was 20 feet away, on the other side of the railing, and I was looking at that exact moment at Sovereign's tail. Because he had finally flicked it at a fly, and I had thought for one foolish second that the horse was about to do something. Daniel Holbrook saw it. He saw a curve of pale gray polymer, smooth machined, sitting in a nest of dark cloth. He saw a thin wire taped along its edge. He saw a small black square, the size of a postage stamp, with 2 metal contacts. He saw it for perhaps a second and a half. He did not move his eyes. He did not move his head. He did, however, move his right leg just slightly, the side of his calf pressing for a count of 3 against Sovereign's flank. Sovereign shifted his weight 1 inch to the left. 1 inch, that was all. The little boy who was in love with the horse saw it, and his face lit up like a candle. The horse had moved for him. He turned to his mother to tell her. His mother was looking at her phone. The boy turned back to Sovereign, beaming, willing him to do it again. Sovereign did not do it again. In the relief station window, Sergeant Mary Aitken stood up. In her earpiece, PC Owen Riley heard the words positive identification, device component, do not approach the bag, and his stomach did the small cold thing that stomachs do when training takes over from feeling. On the bench across the square, the couple with the map folded it up and stood. By the kiosk, the man in the dark t-shirt put down the postcard he had been pretending to consider. Boots stood up. His shoelaces were no different than they had been 30 seconds ago. His day pack was zipped. He smiled, politely, at no one in particular. He moved back into the body of the tour group, drifting in beside the grandmother with the sun hat, who smiled at him kindly because she was a kind woman. He had no idea. He had no idea that from 4 directions, 4 people were now moving toward him at the unhurried pace of strangers, and that within the next 90 seconds his afternoon and his plan for that evening, and quite a lot of his life after that, were going to end. The horse breathed. Daniel Holbrook did not move. It happened in the end, the way the best things in that profession happen. Which is to say, you would not have known it was happening at all. The couple with the map walked over to Petra. They smiled. They asked her in lightly accented English whether she could possibly help them. They were looking for a particular cafe, and the map seemed to be wrong. Petra, who was a kind woman as well as a competent one, turned to help them. Her body angled slightly away from her group. The man in the dark t-shirt drifted up behind Boots. He did not touch him. He simply stood close, the way strangers stand close in any crowded place, the way you stand close to a person at a bus stop. PC Owen Riley approached from the front, with his cold coffee, looking at his phone, walking the way a man walks who is lost in thought and not paying attention. He bumped very gently into Boots's shoulder. "Oh, sorry, mate," he said, miles away. Boots, polite, smiled and said something in what might have been Czech. Sorry, Riley said. "Don't suppose you speak English? I'm trying to find, actually, you know what? Do you mind? Just step over here for a second. There's a yeah, just here, mate. That's it." He had a hand on Boots's elbow. The grip was loose. The grip was friendly. The grip did not let go. The man in the dark t-shirt was on Boots's other side now, and the woman from the map bench had appeared behind him, and somewhere in the small spaces between these 3 people, Boots's day pack had been lifted off his shoulder so smoothly that he did not, for a full 2 seconds, realize it was gone. By the time he did, he was 20 feet from the tour group, walking at a perfectly normal pace, with 3 people around him who were no longer pretending to be anything in particular, but whose hands were on his arms and whose voices were low and whose words were very clear. He did not shout, he did not run. There was nowhere to run to, he went. The tour group did not see it. Petra, helpfully directing the lost couple, did not see it. The grandmother with the sun hat had her back turned. The teenagers were on their phones. The American man with the sunburn was photographing the archway again, because he had decided he wanted a better one. The little boy who was in love with Sovereign saw something. He saw a man in a beige jacket walking away with 3 other people. He did not understand what he had seen. He turned back to the horse. The horse did not move. Daniel Holbrook did not move. 23 seconds later, a black car that had been idling on a side road slid up to the curb on the south side of the parade ground. A door opened, a door closed, the car moved away. It was 4:47 in the afternoon. Petra finished helping the lost couple. She thanked them. They thanked her. She turned back to her tour group and counted heads. 13, she counted again. 13, she felt the small cold drop in the stomach that every tour guide knows, the one that happens when the number is wrong. She did the count a 3rd time slowly, pointing with her finger. 13. She was about to call out, to ask whether anyone had seen Mr. Vlachek, the polite gentleman from Brno who had booked late and paid in cash, and had been so quiet on the coach when PC Owen Riley appeared at her elbow. "Ims Janku," he said. His voice was gentle. His warrant card was already in his hand, held low so that the group would not see it. "Could I have a quiet word, please?" "Just over here." Petra looked at the warrant card. She looked at his face. She did not ask any of the questions that were rising in her throat. She nodded, and she followed him, and she stood with her back to her group while he spoke to her for 90 seconds in a low, calm, careful voice. When she turned back to her tour group, her face was the color of paper, but she smiled. She made her face smile. She lifted her yellow umbrella and said, in bright, clear Czech, that it was time to move on to the next stop, that Mr. Vlachek had unfortunately taken ill and been collected by a relative, that the rest of them should follow her now, please. This way, this way. They followed her. Of course they followed her. The American man took one last photograph of the horse. The teenagers took a selfie. The grandmother adjusted her sun hat. The little boy who was in love with Sovereign waved at him one last desperate wave, and then was tugged away by his mother's hand. Sovereign did not wave back. Sovereign did not move. Daniel Holbrook did not blink. The tour group walked away down Whitehall in the slow gold afternoon light. And they would, every one of them, go home to Brno and to Prague and to wherever else they had come from, and they would show their photographs to their families, and they would say, "And here is the soldier on the horse. Can you believe how still he stood? Can you believe he never moved at all?" And they would never know. That is the part I have thought about the most in the months since. They would never know. The relief came at 6 o'clock. A second mounted sentry rode out from the stable block, and the change was performed in the way it has been performed for hundreds of years, with no fuss and no hurry and no acknowledgement that anything in the world had happened that day other than the slow turning of the clock. Daniel Holbrook rode Sovereign back through the archway. His shift had been 4 hours. He had not moved in any meaningful sense for any of it. In the stable, he dismounted. He handed Sovereign to a groom. He removed his helmet. His hair underneath was flat and damp. He drank a glass of water. He sat down on a wooden bench. He let out a long, slow breath, the first one he had let out in 4 hours, and his hands began, for the first time, to shake. Just slightly, just at the fingertips. He sat there for a long time. I walked home that evening the way I always walked home. Down Whitehall and past the cenotaph and across Parliament Square, with the gold light going slowly out of the sky. I did not know then any of what I have told you. I would learn it in pieces over months from people who would not give me their names, a friend in the Met, a woman who worked in a building near the parade ground, a man at a regimental dinner who had drunk one glass too many. None of them told me everything. All of them told me something. What I knew, walking home that evening, was only what I had seen with my own eyes. A man on a horse, a crowd of tourists, a Czech tour guide in a yellow waistcoat, a little boy with a sandwich, an American with a sunburn. I knew that something had happened because the tour group had left with 13 people instead of 14, and I had counted them 2, the way tour guides do, without meaning to. I knew that Petra's face just before she lifted her umbrella had been the color of paper. I knew that the man on the horse had not moved. That was what I knew. It was not much. It was, I would come to understand, exactly as much as I was meant to know, which was just enough to feel that something had passed close to us all, and just little enough that none of us would ever be afraid. That is the work. That is the whole of it. We come to horse guards in our thousands. We point our cameras. We make the same jokes our parents made and our grandparents made before them. We try, in our small, foolish way, to make the man on the horse react, because his stillness is so total that it feels like a challenge to us, like a wall we want to test. We do not understand that the wall is not a wall. The wall is a tripwire. The man in the saddle is not standing still because he is playing a game with us. He is standing still because stillness is the deepest form of attention a human being can offer to a place. He is reading the crowd. He is reading the boots. He is reading the angles of the cameras and the polite smiles of the men who do not check their screens. He is holding, in the small movements of his hands on the reins, a thread that runs back through a window and into a radio and out into the streets, where men in cheap suits drink cold coffee and pretend to be lost. He sees us, we do not see him. That is the bargain. I think about Daniel Holbrook now, when I pass the parade ground on my tour. I do not know if he is the one in the saddle on any given day. I cannot tell. Under the helmet, which one of them he is. I do not need to. They are all of them, in turn, what he was that afternoon. They are all of them watching. I tip my hat to them, sometimes in a way that no one in my tour group would notice, a small private gesture between me and the man who does not move. He does not nod back. Of course he does not. He is working, but the horse sometimes flicks an ear. And I take it as enough. Here then is what I want you to remember. If you ever stand in front of one of them, and a child offers him a sandwich, and a teenager makes bunny ears, and a sunburned American waves a hand in front of his face, he sees you, he is not ignoring you. He is not bored. He is not asleep behind his eyes. He is counting your group. He is reading your shoes. He is watching the man you did not notice, the polite, quiet one at the back, and he is holding the reins in a particular way that means something to a woman with a radio whom you will never see. He is the last man in London who will let himself be taken for granted, because being taken for granted is the shape his protection takes. He stands so still, you stop seeing him, and what he sees for the rest of us.